Well, thank you so much for tuning in to Morning Live. Now, Black First, Land First, or BLF, will contest the May elections after the Freedom Front Plus's bid to deregister them failed in the Electoral Court yesterday. The Freedom Front Plus had argued that the BLF's membership criteria, which excludes people from joining on the basis of race, ethnicity and skin color, makes it nonsensical for them to be registered because it contravenes the IEC Act and the Constitution. Now, the fact that the IEC had failed to publish the BLF's registration proved to be the party's saving grace in court. And as much as this was a success for the BLF, the Freedom Front Plus says the fight is not yet over. So joining us right now on the telephone is Wouter Wessels, National Head of Elections and Strategy of the Freedom Front Plus, and Andile Mngxitama, who is, of course, the president of Black First, Land First. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us this morning. Andile, and of course, Wouter, to you as well.
Morning.
Thank you so much for having us.
Let me start by getting your reactions to the outcome yesterday in the Electoral Court. Wouter, what was your reaction to that outcome?
Well, let me firstly just correct what you just read. The fact of the matter is that the court yesterday only heard arguments with regards to the condemnation. The merits with regards to if the BLF's constitution does adhere to legislation or not was not heard by the court. So the court found, and the judgment says that because the commission did not publish the registration in the Gazette, the time period to appeal against the decision to have a party registered have not yet commenced, and we actually cannot appeal. But that has legal consequences because parties do have the right to appeal the decision of the Chief Electoral Officer to register a party. So the court did find in our favor to say that the commission did not adhere to legislation in terms thereof. So now there is steps to take to actually have the merits of the case heard. And what we say is important is, and Andile yesterday said it in court as well, if there is an error and if legislation is not adhered to, there must be a remedy. And that is what we are asking for. We cannot allow the Electoral Commission of South Africa to not adhere to legislation. And yesterday's judgment was proof of that, because where does it then stop? If we trust the Electoral Commission to run our elections, and if they do not adhere to legislation with regard to something like the registration of political parties, then we're in trouble. And that is why this judgment is a positive to say they should adhere to legislation. They did not in this case and in other cases. And now we're taking the case forward.
So in other words, you're saying that the BLF basically got off on a technicality, but perhaps also worth mulling over for a second or two. Can we just trace back how the IEC then actually failed to gazette the BLF registration in the first place? And what's your take on that?
Well, they argue that they argued that they were not obliged to do that. That it's not actually a legal requirement, and they had a lot of arguments with regards to that. But the fact of the matter is that the court found in our favor to say that they should have gazetted, and that the act is actually very clear. So it's not that the BLF got off on a technicality. The only argument yesterday was, should they have published or should they not have published? We held that they should have published, and the court found in our favor. So that is what was heard yesterday. The merits of the case is not in front of the court yet, and that will now commence, because it could not, before the court made a ruling on, is the time period for appeal open? Has it closed? Is it still open? Or has it not yet commenced? And it actually has not yet commenced. So now there's other remedies that we must take to actually go into the merit of, did the IEC also err in registering the BLF with its constitution that contravenes Section 16 of the Act.
Andile, let me come to you. I mean, how do you view the court's decision and also the IEC's decision to register BLF in spite of what the Freedom Front Plus has pointed out?
We've been telling the Freedom Front Plus that we'll beat them in court, going to beat them in parliament, coming for the land that they've stolen from us. Freedom Front Plus is a racist party that wants a Boer state, and part of land thieving is denial. Now they deny that it's victory yesterday. They went to court to ask court that it must stop us from going to these elections. Their whole issue, that's why it was urgent. On agencies, stop Black First, Land First from participating in the elections. Well, we are on the ballot. We are going to parliament, resounding victory. And even when, after the possibility that there will be the publication which court said must happen, we'll still again win against this Freedom Front Plus. And our advice to them is this. Guys, prepare yourself to return the land, because we're going to parliament, we're going to force the ANC and EFF to do the right thing, which they failed to do because they also in the pockets of the same land thieves. We will be in parliament, we'll be able to expose any shenanigans in terms of not amending the constitution to bring about land expropriation without compensation. Freedom Front Plus is just terrified. And you know, as a thief and a criminal and a guilty person, they're trying to hide behind courts. No, we're going to parliament, we're going to deal with them directly there. It is now, 8 days before the elections, we've been dragged into courts. These guys, now this is the third time they're taking us to court because they want to make sure that we don't actually go out and campaign so that our people know that we're on the ballot. Party representing black people unapologetically is now on the ballot. That is where we are.
Unapologetically, but is it unconstitutional? Because part of the argument that the Freedom Front Plus had made was that your membership criteria is discriminatory and therefore unconstitutional.
Freedom Front Plus saying black people cannot have a party of black people. Freedom Front Plus. Look at their leadership, all of them Boer. Nobody's saying anything about it. In fact, they have no right to exist in this country, Freedom Front Plus.
Why not?
But party that represent land thieves and racists. The constitution, this is the other thing, the constitution is clear about redress. If you were to accept their argument, then you could not have affirmative action. You could not have employment equity. You could not, because then, or black economic empowerment, because then you could not prioritize black people. We are clear, we have looked at the highest court of South Africa have said that you can, in fact, exclude white people for the purposes of redress. Black First, Land First says, organize black people to address problems created by white people. But we're not saying we're creating a society where we oppress anyone. Even them, we'll ask them to come, white people to queue. We'll give them grants. We're not saying we'll exclude them. But they can't say black people in a black country cannot have a blacks-only organization. It's like going to China and the Frenchmen come and say to the Chinese, you, China, you can't have your own organization. When the French in China have the French organization, like Freedom Front Plus and AWB structure, which must actually be banned. These organizations must be banned.
Wouter will respond to that in just a moment. But do you not then view your own criteria as racist, as has been pointed out? Because you are saying that if you look at the Freedom Front Plus and their leadership structure, it is all lily white. But does that then not contradict what you are saying about your own right to exist?
Blacks can be racist. That's the fact. We are victims of racism. You can't say, for instance, if women were to form an organization to fight for their liberation in this patriarchal society, I, as a man, a beneficiary of patriarchy, say to women, you can't have your own organization. Again, look at some decisions of the Gender Commission. There was an interesting decision where gay men had their own B&B, and some people complained. In fact, the Gender Commission said, no, gay men, because they have a special situation of being discriminated on the basis of sexuality, they have the right to have their own organization. You have to understand positive discrimination and negative discrimination. Negative discrimination is when you exclude people for the purposes of disadvantaging them. Now, Groenerwald, the leader of Freedom Front Plus, wants to join BLF. And if he were to do so, and we said, no, what will we lose, Groenerwald? Nothing. It is just really, there's no case, there's no merit in this matter. We are addressing the problem created by white people, and they will not tell us to have them in our organization. It's not going to happen.
So, Wouter, let me get you to respond to that, because that was part of the argument against why you felt that the IEC should not register BLF as a political party to contest the upcoming elections. Andile Mngxitama saying it is in fact the Freedom Front Plus that is racist in this regard.
I'm not going to respond to all of that and dignify it, but the fact of the matter is that the Freedom Front Plus is not a lily-white organization. Our constitution does not exclude on the basis of race. We have members of all races. We have leadership of all races. And I'm not going to go into that argument. We're not a racist organization. The proof is in the pudding. Look at our manifesto and look at what we stand for. And we stand for equality and equal rights and a better future for all South Africans. And that is what is important. The fact of the matter is, if we listen to the BLF, that is creating racial polarization. We need to build a better future for all South Africans. We can't continue on this route of racial polarization and spreading racial hate. If we listened to Mr. Lindsay Marstorp earlier this year, after the tragedy that occurred at High School Driehoek, where he welcomed the deaths of those white children just because they are white, that's unacceptable. We can't have a political party in our political landscape that is intolerant towards other races. That's nothing better than apartheid. That's nothing better than the atrocities of the past. That is not conducive to creating a better future. We must take hands and build a better country together, find solutions to the problems that we have. And really, the BLF is not conducive to that. It's an organization that, as we have just heard, only wants to spread hate, is not there to actually solve the problems, but to actually attack on the basis of race. You know, in Parliament, we solve a lot of problems together, different political parties. We can disagree on a lot of issues on ideology, but at the end of the day, a lot of us are there for the betterment of South Africa as a whole. And we can take hands, and we're not enemies of each other. But this type of approach will actually completely destroy the democracy that a lot of people have fought for pre-1994.
So where would we locate what Andile Mngxitama and the BLF are advocating for within the ambit of self-determination, which you express in your mission and vision statement?
Excuse me, just repeat the question. I couldn't hear.
I'm saying if we look at the mission and vision statement of the Freedom Front Plus, you obviously are all about self-determination. It is something that you advocate very vociferously on for the self-determination of the Afrikaner people. So where would the BLF and what they are advocating for find expression on that spectrum of self-determination?
Well, according to the South African Constitution, Section 235, each group in South Africa and each community has the right to self-determination. I think there's a lot of misconceptions of what self-determination means, but that's maybe a debate for another day. Fact of the matter is, our mission does not say exclusively for the Afrikaner. We say all communities, and we promote the right to self-determination, the right to have decisions, to make decisions on your own and of your own by yourself. That is what we promote, that each community and each community that defines themselves, not somebody else, not the BLF defining someone. You know, the BLF says that not all black people are black. So they exclude on the basis of race, not only the white people, but certain black people or non-whites as well. So, we say a community and a person should be able to define himself and not be defined by the BLF or by somebody else. And every community and each member of a community should have decision-making power. And obviously, the BLF can stand up for what they believe in, but they can't exclude on the basis of race, because that is contravening the Electoral Commissions Act. It's contravening the Constitution and the founding principles of South Africa. If they stand for what they believe in, there's nothing wrong with that. But they exclude and they spread and incite racial polarization. And that's something completely different.
All right, and this, of course, is now going to the Equality Court. Your take, and you were talking about having to go to court. You have quite a few court appearances
there are many
coming
courts.
up.
White people are terrified. Land thieves are terrified of Black First, Land First. Every single day, they make sure that they go to court. Today, I'm going to court on the 6th. 2 days before the elections, there will be another court ruling trying to stop us. Even that one is trying to stop us. We have defeated Freedom Front Plus. We are going to defeat even the DA. It has the complaint against us with the IEC. It's the other thing, AfriForum. White land thieves are really terrified of Black First, Land First. Here's the thing. They're going to do nothing. We're going to Parliament, and the land issue is going to be addressed. Now, this Freedom Front Plus, for instance, talking about living together. They are not giving us our land back. They are not stopping to celebrate the Blood River war where they slaughtered our people. They are not stopping Orania. They have done nothing, white people, on these parties like this one, to indicate that they are interested in being part of South Africa, which put black people first as the owners of this country. So we are not deterred, and actually, to tell the truth, black South Africans, we must not allow white people to waste our time and to undermine us in the manner that Freedom Front Plus does. If you are serious, you must then take Black First, Land First to Parliament.
Let me ask you this. So, given what you've just said and what you've been expressing over a period of time, if you were to rule South Africa, you were the ruling party in South Africa as BLF, what's going to happen to white people?
They will have to return land and behave like citizens under rules set by the black majority. Or they can go back to Europe if they don't like that regime. White people have done nothing in the past 25 years to indicate that even just acknowledge apartheid and colonialism. The fact that 35,000 white families own 80% of the land is a serious indictment, not perhaps just on white people. Forget them. Thieves do not return things they've stolen. It is an indictment on us as black people. What have we done to address these questions that are facing our people? 9 million black people are unemployed. There is no answer. The president of the country right now says he's going to create 1.3 million jobs in 5 years, because they don't want to touch white interest. Black First, Land First is going to make sure that these matters are addressed without apology. It is time that black people actually stood up and said, this country belongs to us and we must come first. White people have indicated clearly by their actions that they're not interested in the solutions that can make sure we live together. So we will force them to live together with us under justice. Bring back the land, then we can all be one people.
Wouter, what's the way forward for you from here on?
You mean in terms of the case?
Yes.
Well, we are at this stage considering all options and considering what we will do. Let me just state for the record, nobody's terrified of the BLF. It's here about legality, what is right and what is wrong. And as I said in the beginning, we cannot allow the Electoral Commission to err in applying legislation and not be held responsible for that or accountable for that. The ruling yesterday was favorable in terms thereof, that the Electoral Commission was told you are not registering political parties correctly, and that is a step in the right direction. And then we must go forth and get the interpretation of Section 16 of the Act, and we will continue with this. Just for that one reason, that the Electoral Commission cannot make and do as they think fit. They must apply legislation as it stands. And we cannot allow that legislation is not adhered to. That is the most important part here.
Well, Wouter, thank you so much. Wouter Wessels, National Head of Elections and Strategy for the Freedom Front Plus, and of course, Black First, Land First President Andile Mngxitama, for speaking to us this morning. With that, it's time for the news at 7.